Requesting connection. Established. Encrypted. We're live. The show you've been asking for. Advice, technology, and community. Linux first, all others second. This is Ask Noah.
Live from Multispeed Technologies, the Ask Noah show starts right now. This is the show where we came to do all the things on Linux they said couldn't be done and take your questions on how to do the same. The phone lines are open this hour. To be a part of the program, it is a free call, 1-855-450-NOAH. That's 1-855-450-6624. Send an email to live@asknoahshow.com. My name is Noah Chalaya. I am your host. Delighted to be here with you as another episode of the Ask Noah show kicks off this hour. Joining me, my co-host, Mr. Steve Ovens. Welcome in, sir.
Hey, Noah. I've been kind of wrestling with a technical problem. I guess the long and short of it is I don't know how to make VLANs work on Linux specifically. I've always done VLAN tagging on hardware, and I thought I'm going to shove a trunk line into one of my servers and then have it handle the VLANs, and I've not been successful.
Okay,
So
this is interesting to me. So are you doing something super Stevie and complex, or are you, opening up Network Manager, clicking on the, I guess I don't know what tab it is, but there's a tab that you can go in and click on the VLAN and specify it there.
So I grabbed my spare little box, I put OpenSense on it, and then I have a trunk line from that going directly into the server. And on the server, I have tried, you name it, I've tried it. I tried NM2E, I tried NMCLI, I tried just the straight up IP commands, I tried using the bridge command. So far I've tried, 12 different various blog posts on how to do thing. And I don't know whether the problem is I've not done this before, so I can't verify what I'm doing is correct. Like maybe I did something wrong in OpenSense because I don't normally. I was trying to use this to leverage the fact that eventually I'm going to probably switch from pfSense to OpenSense. So I thought, I'll try. This should be easy enough, right? Mm-hmm. Right? But I don't know where the problem is. It's not the cable for sure because this server has been running fine. All I did was shove OpenSense in between it. So it's either I don't know how to do OpenSense, which is completely possible, or I am just really not good with VLANs on Linux.
Okay, so let's circle back here a little bit. So if you specify the VLANs on Linux and you plug it into your existing network, does it work there?
My existing network all has transparent VLANs via the hardware. So they're not. The hosts are completely unaware.
They're just access ports. Could you set yourself up a trunk port? I know that I'm asking you questions that you're like, yeah, that would be my next step in troubleshooting. Noah, congratulations. But could you set up a trunk port for yourself on the existing working network and then plug one of the unknown Linux boxes into it and see if VLAN tagging works?
I suppose that's possible. I'm not. The challenge that I would have is I don't know whether. How do I put this? pfSense goes into my core switch, and then each one of the ports on the core switch handles a different VLAN.
Right.
Right. And so if I shoved all of my VLANs onto one port to make it a trunk port and then shove that into something else and tested, I would still have the same question of does this really work? Did I do something wrong in the switch? Or, I would have the same level of confusion. I know that the VLANs work from the perspective of I've got 3 or 4 VLANs on my home network that are currently doing their thing. So I suppose I would know that they would work and the VLAN config is correct at the pfSense level. Might work.
Maybe I'm not understanding or not listening carefully enough, but so if you plug the Linux computer in, so you take one of your switches and you set it up as a trunk port, or in the Unify world, all networks port, and plug the computer in there. If it gets any network, if it gets the network address on the tagged VLAN, then the VLANs are working on the Linux box, no?
Yep, that's why I said it could work. Where I was saying I don't know where the breakage would be is it's not a one-to-one comparison because I'm still sticking a core switch in between the routing box and the Linux host.
Oh, I see
right?
what you're. Okay, yeah, sure. But in that case, the Linux side is working. Then the question would become, what do we do about the OpenSense side?
Yep, absolutely. Could be a
Okay.
thing that I might try testing out tomorrow.
Can I make a? Here's what I'm trying to get at. In NetPlan, which I know you love, there's a YAML line for VLANs, and then an indent VLAN, and then the number, and then another indent and ID, and then whatever the number is that you want it to be, and then the next line is whatever the physical link is. So like ETH0 or whatever, and then address, and then give it an address, and that's how you define a VLAN in NetPlan.
I'm not using NetPlan.
I don't, but I
then have to switch out my host because I don't know what kind of faff I'd have to do to get NetPlan. I've never put NetPlan on a RHEL box, so I would then also have to connect to the internet briefly to install and or configure a switch from Network Manager to NetPlan, and then see if it would work. But the challenge here is, okay, so step one would just be put it on the interface, but ultimately I want to have a bridged interface that has the VLANs on it so that the VLANs can be passed into VMs that are sitting on top of the host.
Run that. I'm sorry. My brain must be acting a little slow tonight. Run that by me one more time. You want to have what passed to the?
So if you've got a trunk line heading into your virtual server,
Right.
then you would apply multiple VLANs to your bridge.
Oh,
That
I see.
way
On the
your-
vhost.
It's correct.
Okay.
Then the vhost can pass in a specific VLAN to the specific VMs underneath of it.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense.
Right. So then I'd have to, I don't know enough about NetPlan to know how much work that would be to roll over NetPlan on my vhost just to test this.
And the idea is you want to break it out on the vhost so that different VMs can exist on different VLANs.
Essentially, part of this has to do with I'm trying to mock a client situation, and they are sending a trunk port into a vhost. Mm-hmm. And so I want to mock that out.
Sure.
And this was the way that I could think to do it.
Yeah, that's interesting. Well, when you get on the other side of this, I would love to hear what the conclusion of this is. Is this one of those things that like you're in it for the long haul? We're going to OpenSense. It's just a matter of time, or are we still testing the waters to decide if this is a viable venture, so to speak?
Well, I have to get by. I'm I suppose curious at this point. pfSense, there's no particular reason other than automating pfSense is a little bit challenging.
Right.
So
interesting. Well, there's two aspects of this that interest me, Steve. There's the OpenSense aspect, which I think is fascinating, and I want to see. I'm just for your sake, I want to see you move forward. I think it just has a brighter future. All in. The second part of it, I have a vested technical interest in, and that is how you go about passing VLANs in and out of a virtual host, because you're not wrong when you say that is a thing that is widely deployed. It's not, I mean, at our scale, it's maybe a little more common where everything can just exist on one network, but certainly you start getting into larger organizations and the concept that all those servers are going to sit on one LAN, it's almost kind of silly. The way that I've chosen to get around that, and I understand before these words even come out of my mouth, I recognize that there's a scalability limit to doing it this way. Okay. I get that. But a lot of servers they'll have 2 or 4, sometimes NICs on the back embedded, and I'll just create a different bridge to go to the various. So I have physical ports that on the back of the server that go to their respective LANs, and then they just plug in, like you were saying, access port on the switch, and then they just dump in the servers, none the wiser.
So yeah, but I mean that would require you to have so I'll give you, for instance, client has at least 15 different VLANs.
Right. Yeah. It's scalability. Right. So I get it. It's not practical.
It's not even scalability. It's from the perspective of okay, let's assume you have enough NICs in your host. Mm-hmm. Are you actually going to have how many people actually have an extra 3 ports and cables to run from their switch, a managed switch, into a host.
Yeah, I mean, 15. I mean, here's the thing. Even if you had the extra ports, I think the real question there is you're actually going to tie up 15 physical ports and 15 NICs because you don't want to learn how to. So there's a, yeah, not an ideal way to worry about it. But the most I've ever dealt with is 3 different things. There's typically some sort of critical and/or like. It's only for the administrations. It's like the backup servers and the stuff. Nobody's supposed to touch it. It's supposed to be away from everybody. There's that. Then there's like the main one that everybody's on. And then sometimes there's like a services or production or whatever you want to call it, but like a network to bring the things that are being hosted inside of that business to the business. And I haven't hit a scale larger than that. And so it's nice from a troubleshooting / you can color code the wires and this one goes there and that one goes there and all the things. But I recognize that there are limitations to doing it that way. So I circle back to say I have a vested interest in watching you solve this problem.
I mean, I also just don't have the hardware for that. I have, like, my spare box has 2 NICs in it, so I have to trunk it.
Yeah. Well, it would be, it is silly, right? It would be the equivalent of, I can't imagine to, when I think about like, even from like a router standpoint, right? Every router that we've ever set up when there's VLANs, you have one trunk port. Can you imagine if it was like, oh yeah, every time I want a different LAN, I want to assign it to a different physics. I mean, it'd just be a hokey way to do it, to say the least.
Good advice here, folks.
All right. Yeah, we're figuring it out as we fly. All right. Let's dig into some feedback. Our first email comes in from Nick. Nick says, "Hey, Noah and Steve, back in episode 435, you guys asked a question as a follow-up to my feedback about Kubernetes. I was so excited to get back to you with where I was in my Kubernetes journey. The days following that excitement turned out to be a nightmare in container land. I'm running a Mac M4 Mini as a home server, and things were going great. I had Docker update. That's the day Docker became enemy number 1. So after months of troubleshooting, patience, and an old friend intervention, I'm trying to get up my setup going using Podman. My Kubernetes journey took a back seat, and I never got back to the show. Well, here I am again. I'm familiar with containers and the concept of Kubernetes being an orchestrator of managing containers. I've read many articles and books, and I can get things set up to run a single node, but I get stuck on how to configure and run containers. I actually understand what's going on, how they scale, and getting a non-toy container running. I'm not a guy who wants to look under the hood, the covers, and see how it's running, but rather be able to set up a project under Kubernetes and monitor it and see it scale, be able to run it and use the containers inside like I do with a single container in Docker or Podman. Running stuff at home more than likely won't have a need for Kubernetes, but once I get this stuff figured out, I can take this to work and I'll be able to run it where it'll be beneficial. I could be totally wrong, and running at home might have perks as well. This ends up at the level of understanding, but I am at the learning type that I love learning this stuff. Thanks for listening to me ramble on. You guys rock, Nick. So, Steve, I'm going to ask you a couple of pointing questions in case people haven't heard parts of the past episode. If you are a container expert, that's kind of your day job, is managing OpenShift or helping customers manage OpenShift, which is Red Hat's flagship container product. Do you run it at home outside of your lab environment so that you can, do your job?
I don't. I was just going to say I have a lab. I did run it. I ran it for a time back in version 3, and primarily it's a resource hog. No, let me scratch that. That's not fair. It is more hardware than the scale at which I run applications. So when you're running things off of battery, or you're interested in your power consumption, stuff like that, and you have 2 or 3 computers, and at idle, they've got 3 or 4 cores going because they're running etcd and all of the stuff just to keep state of, 6 containers. It seems like a bit of a waste for me. So I have other concerns other than just whether it's scalable or not, right? An enterprise is not really going to fire up a Kubernetes cluster and run 3 applications on it, generally speaking.
So I'm going to be real honest with you, Nick, and I'm going to read into your email maybe a little bit more than you're telling me to or asking us to. So one of the things you say in your email is you say you're not a guy who wants to look under the covers and see how it's running, but you'd want to be able to set up a project under Kubernetes and monitor it and then see it scale and then be able to run it and use containers like you do with the single container in Docker or Podman. Additionally, you say that it's become an enemy because you had all this troubleshooting and impatience and had your friend come and get involved. And so here's, I think, where there's maybe a bit of a disconnect. And I think the disconnect is, I think you do want to look under the hood. I think you do want to look under the hood, and I think you do want to see this because I think it will help you achieve what you want to achieve by way of then you'll be able to get this stuff figured out. Then you'll be able to get it running. Then you'll be able to engage in your learning type and love on this technology. So I think even in your email, I can hear I can hear the internal conflict. On one hand, it's, I don't want to go any deeper. But I don't think that's because you actually don't want to look under the covers or go any deeper. I think it's because it's been a frustrating experience for you up until this point. And so I think I think it's starting to feel overwhelming to you. It's like, man, I just want it to work. And I think the way to just get it to work is to take the covers off and look under. And instead of the top down, let me just see if I can get all the things to work and hopefully under the covers it'll just happen. I don't really need to understand. I think if you flip that model on its head and you start from under the covers and work your way back up from the thing that you understand, the container, I think you might have a better time. Steve, do you think I'm off in la la land, or do you think I'm maybe onto something?
So I guess I'd circle back and say it's okay to be the guy that doesn't want to look under the hood.
Mm-hmm.
But if you are the guy that mentions the thing, it is assumed that you know what the thing is. So if you bring this to work, you will be the guy. This will rest on your shoulders. Very rarely does it happen that someone just comes in and is like, hey guys, would you mind like installing this giant platform, learning how to run it, then run it for me just so that I can click around in the UI? Thanks. It's not going to happen that way. Highly unlikely. So there is some discrepancy there, like Noah was saying, right? You want to kind of dig in. The problem is you can't effectively monitor and scale and interact with it if you don't actually understand what's happening. How do you monitor something that you don't know what's happening on it? How do you scale it, right? When do you scale it? How do you know that this is the time to scale it versus I have a problem? So one of the things that businesses have done for eons and eons is just like, I have a problem, throw more resources at it. Then I don't have a problem anymore.
Mm-hmm. I can buy my way out of this.
Exactly. It doesn't mean that it's actually time to scale, though. It could be an issue of like, you might be throttling on something that's being a bad neighbor, or, you know, something's misconfigured. And so just throwing more hardware at it buries the problem. So I would say that it sounds like if you like to learn like you say you do, I'd say that you probably can't really learn Kubernetes without learning Kubernetes. Like if you were in a big company, like you're in a Fortune 500 company, sure, you can go to work and somebody else runs the platform and somebody else runs, some other group on top of that runs the networking, and another group on top of that runs the VMs that the platform is running on top of, and all you have to do is click some buttons. That's absolutely a thing. If you're bringing the thing to work, you probably don't work in a Fortune 500 company that is siloed like that. So yeah, I'd be interested to hear your thoughts.
Yeah, I want to hear back from Nick. I want to hear back from Nick and see kind of what direction he asks us to take with this. I will tell you, I'm gonna put my sword down in the sand and say that I think as nerds, we have a technical obligation to rip the covers down and get down to the bare mattress and then work our way back up so that we understand the pieces. And here's why I think that's so important. I think that's so important because I'm watching one organization after the other enter a credit card number into a web sign-up form, and that's their IT infrastructure, right? I log in, I put my credit card, now I've got the service, I quote unquote create the users, which amounts to I went to that part of the web UI and said create users and created the usernames and passwords, and there we go. Now everybody can log in and I'm quote unquote managing it, right? You're not managing jack diddly squat. You're using a microservice or a collection of microservices, and somebody else or some company is managing that. I think we as the nerds need to leverage this stuff. And the other thing that I think is really interesting is specifically when it comes to things like Kubernetes, I feel like this is the golden ticket. This is the thing that allows all of these other companies to be successful and allows them to run quote unquote cloud-based services. And it was all written right in our backyard in the sandbox of open source. Agree or disagree?
Yeah, I sometimes, Noah, you just say things so perfectly, there's nothing else to say.
Oh, that's fair enough. All right. So let us know, Nick. Let us know. And then here's the other thing, too. If you are listening to this and you say either way, like, oh, even if Nick isn't interested, I'd like to hear, let us know and we will dig deeper. On the other hand, if you're listening to this, you're like, you know what? I think Nick is onto something. I think you guys are overblowing it and you guys are digging way too deep and pushing down an apple cart that nobody is interested in. Well, let us know that too. And it'll help kind of recalibrate our nerd meter. I want to share one quick story. And that is when one of the first things that got me into Linux was the blind opportunity of taking a server that I never played with before, throwing a copy of Red Hat Linux that I've never used before, installing a piece of software that I'd used before but only on Windows, and bringing it in and wowing everybody at the office who marveled at the reliability as compared to the Windows 2000 server. As Steve kind of reoriented me to, the response that I got at that organization was they opened their checkbook, flew me out to a training center, got me professional training in Red Hat Linux, then got me certified, then brought me back in to actually go do the deployment. And I share that story to share with you the following. If you're going to put something into production, whether or not, whether you are the decision maker who chooses to put the thing into production, or you are just the employee or one of the team members who suggests that it goes into production, I would implore you in the strongest possible terms, before you do that, make sure that you have an understanding of the thing that you are putting into production. For all of the reasons that we just outlined, and we don't want to become masters of the web control panel. We want to understand how the technology works, because I believe in the next 10 years, that's what's going to separate the, what would I say? The samurais from the imitators.
From the Linux Newswire newsroom, this is the Week in Review with JT.
For the week of June 29th, 2025, here's the Linux and open source news. XFS Progs 6.15 has been released. Crypt Setup 2.8 is out. Docker has released version 28.3. Rust 1.88 is now available. Mir 2.21 has been released. Firefox ESR 140 is out. The Linux Foundation appoints Jonathan Bryce to lead the Cloud Native Computing Foundation. In distro news, Refresh OS 2.5 has been announced. The smallest server suite, version 49, has been released. The Tails team has announced the release of Tails 6.17. Oracle 10 is now available. And Fedora Linux ponders dropping the 32-bit packages, which could impact support for Steam Gaming, and could also change support for Bazite to shut down, according to its creator. In open source hardware news, Berkeley launches a lightweight open source humanoid robot. And Amazon open sources DeviceLayout.jl, an open source tool to design quantum integrated circuits. In open source AI news, the Linux Foundation has announced that it will host Agent-to-Agent Protocol project, an open standard originally developed by Google to support secure communication and interoperability between AI agents. Google has announced Gemini CLI, an open-source CLI AI agent. Microsoft has announced the first milestone of its project to transform the popular Visual Studio Code editor into an open-source AI development environment. Specifically, the company revealed that the GitHub Copilot chat extension is now open source on GitHub under the MIT license. And lastly, China's Baidu makes their foundation model Ernie 4.5 open source.
Our second email comes in from Araya. Araya writes in and says, "Hi, Noah and Steve. You guys run a great show. Thanks. I'm looking for a touch laptop or tablet that I can use as an e-reader. I bought some old Chromebooks in the past and installed Mr. Chromebox and Fedora on them. While this was a really cheap solution and I like having the attached keyboard that flips out, it was a pain to set up and they're pretty slow. I'm considering a used Lenovo Yoga off eBay. Well, was wondering if you had any recommendations. Thanks, Araya." Steve, do you are you a touchscreen 2-in-1 kind of guy at all?
Actually, my wife really loves them. So,
Oh, no kidding.
And her sister as well. Yeah, Mr. DeLuca gave us one to very generously a couple years ago, and I bought her sister the newer version of that, which is slightly bigger, which was kind of a disappointment because when I looked on paper, it was like 1.3 inches, but it was the difference between going from like an 11-inch to a 13.5-inch laptop, that sort of thing. And so, but yeah, in general, the women in my life seem to really like them.
So this is kind of out of my scope. So I'll defer to you. Do you have a specific model that worked better than others, or in your mind was it a feature complete thing that as long as it's a 2-in-1 and you install the Linux on there, it works just fine?
We went with the ProBook. The reason being is so I've looked at the Yogas in the past and the support is not across the board. When we were given the HP ProBook that Mr. DeLuca gave us, Fedora went on there and everything just worked immediately. And so I was like, well, this is probably a pretty good sign. Let me buy the newer version of this. And it also was the same thing. No futzing around. I had a Yoga for a brief period of time, and now this was a couple years ago, but I actually had to write a script that would flip the orientation when the accelerometer recognized that there was a change. And so that was, less than awesome. And my wife is highly tolerant of it. Like, if you flip it, click this little icon, right? That was okay for her. But a lot of people, myself included, that had been super annoying. Like, I'd have been shaking the screen going, why are you not flipping? Right?
So the closest I have, well, by the way, I guess we should specify too, when he says Mr. DeLuca, he's talking about Chris from CTC Solutions. So CTC Solutions is a very kind and generous company who has donated many laptops to people in need. And so Steve and I would probably not call ourselves in people of need, but we're nonetheless recipients of extraordinary generosity. And actually at Southeast Linux Fest, CTC Solutions was kind enough to bring some more laptops out there and donate those away. And so when you hear things like that on the program, I hope that it impresses upon you that if you're looking, or particularly if you're in the West Virginia area and you're looking for people to help come alongside you and do technical work, that you give preference to the people that gave into the community first, and people that both need it and people who are just, grateful recipients of generosity. I have experience with the Dell series of the 2-in-1s, and the thing is, like you, Steve, I did not have great luck getting it to auto rotate and all those sorts of things. And so I largely just keep it in one orientation. And then there's a couple little add-ons that I did to like Firefox that allows it to be more tablet-esque, to where like you can touch the screen and scroll and that sort of thing. And I think these days it's just about :config, and there's a toggle of sorts. You could go look it up. But I've had pretty good luck with the Pine Tab. And it's a 2-in-1 insofar as it has a keyboard. The rotation on that sort of thing works just fine. Downsides is it's not as terribly powerful of a processor. And so if you're unhappy with the Chromebook, my suspicion is you're probably going to be unhappy with the Pine Tab. And the second part of it is it's ARM, so you're going to be limited on what software that you can run. But hopefully that gives you something to go off of. Our third email comes in from Carrie. Carrie writes in and says, "Hi, Noah and Steve. I wanted to write in regarding your question about having a holiday episode about tech to buy gifts. I would suggest that the episode be recorded and put out prior to Black Friday or Cyber Monday. I don't personally celebrate the holidays, but I do take advantage of the sales to buy great tech at a good price for myself and my family. So it might be good to hear about the cool gadgets you guys recommend ahead of time so we can get our virtual shopping list together before those big sales. Just my 2 cents. Thanks for all you guys do. I've been listening since day one. Also know it was really great to meet you and your family at Scale 22X. All the best, Carrie. Carrie, thanks for writing in. We really appreciate that, and we're absolutely going to do that. In fact, I already started my shopping list this year, Steve.
Uh-oh. You have a shopping list.
I do. So the old storage server in the house there is approaching 70%, and when we get to about 85, it's going to be time to delete some stuff or upgrade the drives. And so I think I'm going with option B. I'm going to upgrade the drives. And effectively what I've done something that I think is kind of clever. It's not really that clever, but I think it's kind of clever. I took the amount, I started asking people, what do you pay for an entertainment bill? What's your cable, streaming, all the things, right? And you got to dig a little bit because here you have no idea how many times I've gotten this answer. What's your streaming bill? $12.99 a month. Really? You only spend $13 a month? Yeah. What's it on? Netflix? You only have Netflix? No, we have Hulu Plus. Okay. Anything else? Yeah, Disney Plus. Anything else? HBO Plus. Anything else? Showtime Plus. Anything else? What's the total amount for all of that combined? Well, I don't know. And then we get to like, $70-$80 or something like that, right? But they don't even know. It was just, they have quote unquote one streaming service until they think about it a little bit. And then it turns out we got like 7 streaming services and then there's always an answer, right? Well, this is for the kids. Anyway, so I took an informal survey of the people around me, of the people in my life to say, what do you pay for entertainment? And I took that amount and said, okay, every month I'm going to take that amount of my checking account and I'm going to put it into a savings account. I'm just going to let the money sit there. And I'm going to see if I can purchase hard drives and the things that I want to use for the way that I choose to entertain myself in my house for at the same cost or lower than the cost of everybody else. And last year, I think in part because I didn't think ahead, also in part because I just had other things going on, I didn't purchase any new drives, and it didn't really bite me because I didn't really run out of space. But I think this is going to be the year that I upgrade the drives. The thing that has, started to impress upon me lately is if you're buying drives, you're essentially buying the data if you're doing it right anyway, you're essentially buying the data 3 times, right? The primary server, the backup server, and then the offsite. And so I've had to adjust my mathematical expectations of what it costs me to store a terabyte of data. But I think I've got that down, and I could be talked out of this, Steve. But at the moment, I'm leaning towards the Seagate Pros.
What size?
I think 18 terabytes. Really what that's going to come down to is I'm going to go to the Newegg's and the Amazons of the world, and I'm going to do the calculations to find out what the cheapest dollar per terabyte is and whatever that ends up being. But the last time I checked, I think that was around the 18 terabyte mark. Say again.
Are you going with the Iron Wolf Pros? Like, what is the Seagate Pro?
Yeah, you're right. Iron Wolf Pro. Sorry. There's the Exos and there's the Iron Wolf. And I here's the thing. I struggle with this, like, I always buy this brand because the reality is they change year to year. In fact, my favorite resource for this is Backblaze. Backblaze every quarter publishes all of their drives and what the results are. And it's fascinating because you can tell so much from looking at that data. So for example, you can see when they introduce a new drive because there's just less of them than all the rest of them. But then they publish the failure rate so you can see, oh my gosh, they have X amount of thousands of these drives, and in this year and this batch and that thing or whatever, they had X failure rate. And so I struggle to say any particular brand or any particular model is quote unquote good because it just changes year to year, quarter by quarter, really. But I consistently see good results with the Seagate Iron Wolf. And the other thing is it's a friend of mine was a mechanical engineer for Seagate for decades and actually just recently retired. And you can tell a lot about a company by the way that the people that work on the inside where the sausage is made, how they speak about the company, how they speak about the company culture, how they speak about their approach to quality and those sorts of things. That in some ways is more insightful to me than data. So you combine both of those together and that's how I arrive at my conclusion. I'm not saying it's the right solution for everybody, but that's how I arrived at the Iron Wolf Pros. And I think I'm not doing it yet, even though there's a temptation because the server's getting a little full. I'm holding off until they go on sale. I'm going to do the Black Friday thing. But I think we're going to do that, Steve. I think we're going to go ahead and do an episode a little bit earlier in the year so that people can have a good, nice, long-running start to go get their Christmas shopping and shop the sales.
Would you ever consider recertified drives?
100% I would. Mm-hmm.
So for my backup server, because I am running them in a mirror and because it is the backup server, I actually went and got MDD drives, the enterprise drives.
Okay.
And I got 20 terabytes for $210 or something like that. So I got 20 terabyte hard drives for $450 after tax.
I just realized that I made a boo-boo. Here's why I would consider used drives or refurbished drive, whatever you're going to call it. And actually why, frankly, I almost would tell you you're a fool not to, is if you need the longevity, that is to say, you want to buy the drives and it's not a function of data safety, but it's a function of you want it to go a longer time, then maybe it's worth investing the money in the new drive. But here's the thing. I've had brand new drives that run for a few weeks and die. I've had brand new drives that run for a few months that die. And I've had refurbished drives that run for 5 years and never die. And they got cycled before. So I don't put almost no stock whatsoever in the idea of, well, if you buy new drives, you at least got, no, you don't. You absolutely don't. It's run of the mill. And you do the burn-in tests and you run them for a little bit because you try to do the best you can. In the end, there's no guarantees. So have the data in 3 places, have a good backup strategy. And then I'm going to mix some metaphors here. You treat your drives like cattle and they're not pets.
I also look at the warranty. So those drives that specifically come with a 5-year warranty. And so when you look at that versus the warranty you get on a brand new drive, generally speaking, they're not going to warranty things if they think it's going to die before that. It just makes no sense, right? And so while the warranty is not the best barometer, it's a pretty good one because they're betting that these drives are going to last five years and 1 day.
Right. Exactly. 100%. So, we will make the alteration. And if you have ideas for, as we get into the holiday areas, let us know at live@asknoahshow.com. So the next phone is made by a company called LibreX, or rather, they want to make a smartphone. Most smartphones today are built around a model that prioritizes the manufacturer's control over the user's freedom. And there's a deep lack of transparency, growing conflicts of interest, and a constant surveillance disguised as convenience. So LibreX set out to build something different, and they came up with the LibreX Nex. It's a phone that doesn't spy on you and doesn't hide its code. It doesn't rely on opaque commercial agendas. Rather, it's a solution that's free, it's ethical, and it's open. And the reason that they chose open source as their foundation is because of the privacy as a principle instead of a product. And so they came out with this idea that they were going to build this phone. And they launched a crowdfunding campaign on Indiegogo. And they are still in the prototype phase and realize that they're not going to make their funding deadline. So they're still going to do the phone. But the model that they chose, the funding model that they chose, is going to give everybody their money back. And here's what I think is just a really nice nod to the open source community. This is open source hardware done right. This is crowdfunding done right. So if you are a person that has any influence or has any thoughts of doing crowdfunding or doing a hardware project, listen up and pay attention because this is how you do it. Hello, everyone. There are only 3 days left until the end of our campaign, and it seems unlikely that we will reach the ambitious goal we set for ourselves. But don't worry, we're going to make the LibreX Nex happen. We have understood that we need to launch a crowdfunding campaign with a more advanced project and with a functional prototype. We are negotiating with investors who respect the free and software community. and our values to join Librix shareholding so that we can develop the phone and achieve a functional prototype that you're all asking for. To all of you who have supported the Librix Next by participating in this campaign and purchasing the phone, we want to give you a gift. When we launch the new crowdfunding campaign, we will create a special edition just for you with a unique numbering and a thank you letter signed by the entire Librix team. Of course, Indiegogo is going to refund your money once the deadline is passed. We chose this model, a fixed goal, because we're fully committed and aware to the challenges involved in a project like this, and we couldn't allow it to be left unfinished due to insufficient resources to complete it. Thank you very much. Stay tuned for upcoming news. Should you have any questions or require any further information, please feel free to contact us at info@librix.net. There's a couple of things I want to draw your attention to. So the first thing is, you know how many people have gotten burned and have a bad taste in their mouth because they went to fund a hardware thing and it never came to fruition and it was vaporware, or by the time it finally did come to fruition, it was so old and outdated and useless, or there were other competitors on the market by that point that there was just no value in it. It's happened a lot. Happened to me enough times, and I don't participate in this stuff that often, that I don't crowdfund hardware anymore. I just don't do it because it's just if and when you can produce it, let me know, and then I'll see if I want to spend my money on it. But it's not something. I'll crowdfund other things. I'll crowdfund art. I'll crowdfund books. I'll crowdfund movies. But I'm very wary of hardware because I've just gotten burned one too many times. Companies like this, organizations like this, are awesome because they're willing to try something without transferring the risk to you. And so I think this is it's an example of one of the most responsible, forward, transparent hardware crowdfunding campaigns I think I've ever seen. And I wish the Librix team all the luck in the world as they move forward, because do we need a Linux-based phone? 100% we do. Does the Pine phone come really close? Yeah, it does. I mean, I think the basics are there. And the fact that I can go I bought one Pine phone, and my Pine phone Pro showed up, and I had it in my hands less than a week or so, and I ordered a second one and got one for my wife. And then we've got one in like a little kit to play with, because the ability to go download an operating system off the internet and put it onto an SD card and plug it into the phone, and the phone boots up and starts that operating system, and then you can flash it to the eMMC. Unreal. Right? Unreal. Compared to doing that with Android phones where you got a ADB and you got to get in there. And in the early days, you could brick a phone doing that. And I have plenty of coaster phones to attest to that. So the fact that there's a manufacturer that wants to build me a phone that I can load whatever the heck I want on it, awesome. The fact that they have hardware kill switches in it, awesome. It's an awesome phone all the way around. I don't have a bad things to say for it. And I would tell you that I more than got my value out of it. But it isn't going to compete with my Google Pixel 8. It just doesn't. It just doesn't. They are different classes of phones. And so we need one that hits that sort of tier A class. I don't know for sure that the Nex is going to be that phone, but here's what I do know. The hardware switches are on the outside where you can get to them. You don't have to take the battery off and the back off and all that sort of thing and use a little tweezer pen thingy majigger to get the switch to flip up and flip down, little dip switches. They're actual switches on the top of the phone. I know that the phone is built to be a higher powered phone, and I know that very much like the Pine phone, they built it to be a Linux phone first. It's not an Android phone. We're not reflashing. It didn't come with Android and then you're flashing it up. I want something like this to exist. I very much do. And I got to tell you, when you go through their site and look at some of the renders of the images that they have, this whole idea of convergence that kicked up around 13, 14, and then died again because it just didn't go anywhere, Apple is starting to move that direction, right? They very much are. And I think it's interesting, and I think it's exciting, the idea that we would be able to have a mobile phone that you'd be able to plug into a deal and get a full-on desktop-like experience. I don't think that exists anywhere else. Steve, I know you're not a phone guy. Do you think you would be more of a phone guy if the phone was just running plain old Linux and you could load Arch and you could pick your desktop environment and load what software you want onto it and all the things? Or is it for you, it's a function of you just don't want to be that attached to a piece of technology? I
think it's the latter. I mean, I would take a Linux phone as, okay, I would take a Linux phone as long as I could put on it what I need for work. Because honestly, that is the primary reason that I have a phone, because work pays for it. That is my primary. Otherwise, like, honestly, I don't even know where it is right now. I'd have to use the Find My Phone button on my watch to be able to find my phone. I just don't care. I don't care to be attached to. You know what I need? I need an MP3 player. I have a phone that I use, and all it is an MP3 player. It's an old Nexus 5XX phone that I take it running with me because honestly, I just want an MP3 player. That's all it needs to be able to do, and that's the device that I have. And outside of that, I don't care one lick about a phone.
So let me ask it to you this way. If you could get a good MP3 app on a Linux phone, let's just say for the sake of argument, we're not having a work discussion. It's just what does Steve want to invest his money in kind of a thing. Would that scratch the itch for you? And would it maybe even do it better from the standpoint that you don't have to run the Google stack and the privacy invasive stuff? It just,
I mean, it would be of interest, but because I run with it or I take it, like I was outside cutting down trees with my chainsaw today with my crappy phone strapped to me, right? I don't care whether it gets damaged. Like, the whole point of it is I put it in a little Ziploc bag or whatever so that I'm not directly selling it, but if I take it everywhere, and so I wouldn't take a $500 phone and do that.
Okay, so costing, that makes sense. All right. Well, wish Nex all the best of luck, and if you have any interest in crowdfunding them or keeping up to the latest, we'll have a link in the show notes, podcast.asknoahshow.com. Fedora Linux developers are proposing to drop support for 32-bit packages in the upcoming Fedora 44 release, saying that many other projects have ceased support for it. The backlash from the community against this move has been swift and vocal. Gaming on Linux reported that it might be a problem for Steam. It might be a problem for Steam gamers, as it needs 32-bit to work properly. And even if Linux gaming OS Bazite developer Kyle, I'm going to butcher his last name, said that the move would kill off the operating system as it's happening too soon, even if Steam had required the packages to function in 64-bit. So Steve, point blank, if you were Fedora, would you pull support for 32-bit for 32-bit libraries?
If I was Fedora, I would be looking at my user base and trying to decide whether the segment of my user base that is playing video games, because primarily it's video games and older software. Older software is generally not where Fedora lives, because Fedora lives on the leading edge. Generally speaking, you don't go and grab Fedora to run a piece of software that's 25 years old. That's just generally not. You might be able to do it, but that's not the people that they're targeting, especially with their quick release cycles and stuff like that. So I would be looking at my segment of the community and trying to figure out how big is the gaming community versus how much of a overhead I feel like it is to continue to maintain the 32-bit libraries.
Let me ask you this. In your mind, what's the difference between Microsoft saying, hey, we need this TPM chip, and we take the approach of, well, the longer you let it go, the longer the tail becomes, and supporting 32-bit libraries, which at this point, 64-bit libraries have been out for, 22 years, 23 years?
It's a tough one to kind of split that hair, but on the one hand, we're talking about something that, while arguably is a vanishing small segment of the population relative to the entire size, that being the TPM chip, it is a security related move, and it is generally better for the hygiene overall, and it is not removing your ability to run the software. Yes, I understand that it's changed the hardware, but if you fire up, you go buy yourself a new laptop with Windows 11 on it and it's got the TPM chip and all kinds of wonderfulness, you'll still be able to run the same software that you just ran before you switched out your laptop. Whereas when you're removing the 32-bit libraries, you're actually disabling the software from an entire swath, like huge sections of your user base can no longer use it, whether it's games or whether it's older, not even older software, but some software is just built on top of 32 libraries for one reason or another. I can remember that, for example, it wasn't too long ago that 32-bit libraries from sound was more stable or had a significant benefit, and therefore those were used. And so it feels like the difference here is the complete removal of an option of running software as opposed to moving forward and adopting the hardware, right? Because at the end of the day, I'm not just thinking about the removal of the 32-bit CPU code, but more the libraries that these softwares have come to depend upon.
I struggle with this one a little bit. So on one hand, I am not entitled enough to take the approach of like, wow, you will maintain my 32-bit libraries indefinitely until I'm done with them. Get to work. Okay, so I can't take that approach. At the same time, projects like Bazite are dead if this goes through, right? And I think they've pulled the request for now, or it's been withdrawn or whatever. That in no way seems to indicate that means that this is no longer a thing and we're not having the discussion anymore. If you have any doubts about that, I invite you to look back at the whole telemetry thing. But if this goes through, projects like Bazite just cease to exist. And if the next project, the next Bazite that comes along, they sure as heck won't do it on Fedora, they're going to do it elsewhere. And that kind of seems like it's an uncomfortable rub. I don't like it.
You know, we also have history here. Like Canonical tried to do this a couple of years ago, and they decided that perhaps they would change directions, at least for now. And I wonder if this was taken into consideration before the proposal at Fedora, and they thought, well, you know what, enough time has passed, and the objections that were 3 or 4 years ago, or however long ago it was, have largely been solved. I wonder if that's part of the calculus here.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I'm sure it probably is. I think that at some point, well, let me ask you this. Do you think 32-bit libraries will be with us forever from the standpoint that there are just some games that they're never going to get rewritten in new libraries?
I don't know how to answer that question. I would hope that we would be able to compile and run them so that we can preserve that history, because it would be a real shame if we couldn't. Will we get 32-bit emulators that will actually work functionally? Maybe, right? Because we can emulate all the other older software. It just took a long time for people to decide that was worth doing. So maybe we will. Who knows?
Interesting. I hadn't even thought about that. Or does it become like a specialized thing, right? Do the, whatever, the Nix people or whoever else say, okay, you know what? So you want to run these 32-bit libraries. The vast majority of distros aren't going to do that anymore. So we will, and then I'm sure there will be lots of options and ideas as to how to crack that nut.
That's kind of interesting. I don't remember this being that big of a deal when 16-bit libraries kind of went away. We ended up with DOSBox or things of the nature. So be interesting to see how much more of an impact 32-bit libraries have.
100%. And just probably by nature of there being more software around when 32-bit libraries reign supreme. Music and errors means we're out of time. I thank you for joining us. Hey, the entire back catalog of the show, all the way back to episode 1. Some people trim their RSS feeds. We do not. It's available at podcast.asknoahshow.com. Miss something in the show or want to learn more? That same place, podcast.asknoahshow.com, has your show notes. We're back next Tuesday, 6 p.m. Central. asknoahshow.com.